Welcome to Stat Masters. I'm your host, Evan Ringler, and every week this season, I'll be bringing you 20 stats in under 20 minutes to help you win your fantasy leagues. For all my research in these videos, I use the data analysis tools at PlayerProfiler.com. You should check them out. They're really nice for filtering all kinds of different data that we have on the site. Let's get it started with number one, Breece Hall. Over the last 2 weeks since the coaching change, Breece has 84% of snaps versus 74% prior to that, 83% of carries versus 64% prior to the change, 22% target share, which was 15% in weeks 1 through 5, and a 76% route participation, up from 60%. He also is averaging 24 points per game versus 14.3 points per game in the first 5 games of the season. Breece is back in play to compete for the overall running back one in fantasy, despite the inefficiency and unexciting offense. Let's go to the Packers offense next. Out of the 20 touchdowns scored by the Packers offense this season, 17 have been passing. 1 was a rush by Jaden Reed, 1 was a rush by Malik Willis, and 1 was a rush from a running back, Josh Jacobs. There is simply no way this trend continues. I would expect more rushing touchdowns and fewer passing touchdowns going forward, and Josh Jacobs should be the primary beneficiary. Sticking with the Packers, let's look at Jordan Love. Out of the 32 quarterbacks projected to start this week, Jordan Love ranks 31st in sack plus scramble rate, ahead of only Kirk Cousins. This means that his dropbacks are almost always turning into pass attempts, which is great for fantasy. The system is also conducive to high-volume passing, as the Packers, with Love, rank 8th in plays per minute over expected, 11th in plays per game, 10th in dropback rate over expected, and 13th in dropback rate. Those stats are brought to you by Fantasy Life. He's also a gunslinger that loves to throw downfield, ranking 4th in air yards per attempt. This is a great spot for wide receivers, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but it is hard to figure out which one to start every week. Number 4, the Giants' play volume. The Giants quietly boast one of the better offenses in the NFL in terms of play volume, ranking 4th in plays per minute over expected, 4th in plays per game, 9th in dropback rate over expected, and 8th in raw dropback rate. After this week against the Steelers, they also have a beautiful schedule remaining against the Commanders, Panthers, Bucks, Cowboys, Saints, Ravens, Falcons, and Colts. All of these teams present great opportunities for the Giants' passing game, specifically Malik Nabers and Tyrone Tracy, hopefully, to outperform expectations down the stretch. Now we'll look at T. Higgins versus Jamar Chase. A lot of people have been talking recently about T. Higgins out-targeting Jamar Chase in 4 straight games. However, this does not mean we should expect Higgins to outproduce Chase in fantasy, as Jamar's targets are simply more valuable than T's. Jamar Chase averages 5.9 yards after the catch per target, while Higgins is at 2.5. Also, 31% of Higgins' targets are contested, while Chase is at just 8%. Chase also has a better target quality, target accuracy, and catchable target rate compared to Higgins. While T. Higgins does have a higher depth of target, Chase dominates in yards per target and fantasy points per target. It's important to remember that not every target is worth the same. Number 6, David Montgomery. In 2023, Montgomery had a target rate of 25.8% and a yards per route run of 1.26. This season, Monty has a target rate of 46.7% and a yards per route run of 4.43. This year, 33% of his fantasy production has come via the air, as opposed to 19% of his fantasy production last year. These are unsustainable numbers that are sure to regress. On top of this, Montgomery has a lower route participation this year. Plus, Gibbs has been taking on a higher rush share over the last 3 games. I still like David Montgomery a lot as a player, especially in half PPR, but we should expect some regression for his receiving workload. Let's go to a quick word from the Podfather.
Oh, every week I'm answering these start-sit questions on Sunday morning. I go to the weekly rankings on PlayerProfiler.com just to make sure that my instincts are correct, and sometimes they're not. And guess what? More often than not, I go with the projections. You may not feel great about starting Daniel Jones or Wan'Dale Robinson, but the projections say, hey, that's the move. It may not feel right, but you use those projections to get it right. That's the power of the Player Profiler system. It's Evan Ringler, it's Bradley Stalder, it's Theo Greminger, of course, it's Billy Muzio making these rankings possible. The season rankings, so you know who to pick up, who to trade for. The dynasty rankings are part of this. The offensive line rankings from Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. Then we get our cornerback rankings, which show which corners are matched up with which wide receivers. And now, in collaboration with the IDP show, we have IDP rankings. Did you know that? Did you? So go to playerprofiler.com, use promo code PODFATHER. Get you 25% off the player rankings package right now at playerprofiler.com. Enjoy!
All right, let's get right back to it with Derrick Henry. Henry is currently scoring 7 points per game over expected, which is far more than any other running back. However, I think this is fairly sustainable rather than other overperforming running backs, as Henry has an amazing situation. The Ravens' offensive line currently ranks second in run blocking rating, second in yards before contact per attempt, and 27th in stuffed run rate, which is a good thing. His efficiency is also still elite despite his old age. And he's also facing the second highest average box count, which makes it even more impressive. Among 24 running backs with 70-plus carries this year, the King ranks second in breakaway run rate, first in rushing EPX, first in true yards per carry, fourth in yards created per carry, and first in yards per carry over expected. Derrick Henry is the perfect player to absolutely destroy all of our expected points models. For number 8, we'll be looking at target quality. Among 40 wide receivers with 100 or 80 more routes this year, the best players in target quality are Alec Pierce, Trey Tucker, Brian Thomas Jr., Terry McLaurin, and Alan Lazard. Targets to these players are worth more fantasy points than other players because they're more accurate and they're further downfield. The worst players, the worst wide receivers in terms of target quality are Cortland Sutton, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Rome Odunze, and CeeDee Lamb. All of these guys also rank near the bottom in catchable target rate. Targets to these players are simply not as valuable as other wide receivers because they're shorter down the field and less accurate. Number 9, Garrett Wilson. The only players with a lower average depth of target than Garrett Wilson this year are Wan'Dale Robinson, Elijah Moore, and Chris Godwin. Wilson's depth of target is lower than Jackson Smith and Jigba's by 1.7 yards. Garrett Wilson also has the second lowest catchable target rate despite this depth of target. I expect Devontae Adams to see an elite target share on third downs and in the red zone, which will severely limit Wilson's ceiling this year. And as I mentioned every week on this show, I think that the Jets will be a dumpster fire in 2025 and beyond. Number 10, Tank Dell. We all know Dell has been bad this year, but I was shocked when I looked at the numbers. Currently, Dell ranks 50th in target share, 63rd in target rate, 55th in air yard share, 64th in points per game, and 84th in yards per route run. The one bright spot in his game is that Dell is underperforming his expected fantasy points by a wide margin, meaning that we shouldn't expect it to be quite this bad going forward. However, Nico Collins should be back in a couple weeks, which will put a tight cap on Dell's ceiling this season. He might have a big game or two, but he's pretty much irrelevant in most redraft leagues. And I think we probably should have seen this coming. I mean, he is coming off a broken leg and a gunshot wound prior to this season. Number 11, Jameson Williams. In weeks 1 through 2, JMO had a 24% target share and a 45% air yard share. In weeks 3 through 6, that target share dropped to 13% and the air yard share dropped to 30%. And in week 7, he had a 4% target share with a negative 3% air yard share. In the first 4 games, JMO had a 93% route participation, which has dropped to 80% over the last 2 games. Tim Patrick and Khalif Raymond are useful players that will take some routes from JMO. Obviously, the Lions offense has a ton of mouths to feed and is quite run heavy. JMO is currently a specialty player who is close to a non-factor in the red zone, in my opinion. All of his metrics have been trending down since the start of the season. I view JMO, even when he returns from suspension, as outside of the top 50 wide receivers in seasonal leagues. He will undoubtedly have a big game or two, but I want to stay far away in fantasy. Number 12, Theo Johnson, everyone's favorite sleeper rookie tight end. Despite some production in weeks 5 and 6 without Malik Neighbors, Theo Johnson remains the worst volume tight end in the league. Among 29 tight ends to run 100 or more routes this year, Theo Johnson ranks last in target share at 8.4%, while second to last is Sam Laporta at 12%. Last in target share at 7%, or target rate at 7%. Last in yards per route run at 0.61. Second to last in air yard share ahead of Johnny Munt. Last in points per game and last in expected points per game. I highly doubt that this profile turns into a legit dynasty asset. If I did have any shares, I would be selling for anything I could get. Number 13, Kyren Williams. Among 24 running backs with 70 or more carries this year, Kyren ranks last in breakaway run rate, last in rushing EPX by a wide margin, 21st in true yards per carry, 21st in yards created per rush, and 20th in yards per carry over expected. Kyren is not a special running back at all. However, volume is king in fantasy football, which makes Kyren an RB1 rest of season, no question about it. But being completely reliant on volume is very risky. I expect at some point that Corum will get a legitimate shot to siphon volume from Kyren due to his inefficiency, which could kill Kyren's fantasy value. Corum is still a top-tier handcuff, that's for sure. Number 14 is Tyler Allgeier. Allgeier currently posts better numbers than Bijan Robinson in the following efficiency categories: breakaway run rate, rushing EPX, true yards per carry, yards created per rush, and yards per carry over expected. Tyler Allgeier is far from a scrub that is preventing Bijan from dominating fantasy. He's legitimately a good running back that deserves to shine as well. If either of these players gets hurt, the other will surely smash in fantasy. Number 15 is Chase Brown versus Zach Moss. We're going to be comparing their numbers in multiple efficiency categories. Among 33 running backs with 60-plus carries, this is how Moss and Brown compare. In breakaway run rate, Brown ranks 9th, while Moss ranks 30th. In juke rate, Brown ranks 2nd, while Moss ranks 25th. In EPX, Brown ranks 4th, while Moss ranks 31st. In true yards per carry, Chase Brown ranks 9th, and Zach Moss ranks 33rd. And it's a similar story for yards created per rush and yards per carry over expected. It's very clear that Chase Brown is a better rusher than Zach Moss, certainly more efficient at least. While Moss is more trusted on passing downs, I think Brown's recent usage is a sign of things to come. Recently, he's been splitting the receiving work with Zach Moss, and he's been receiving a higher carry share as well. I view him as an RB2 going forward, while Zach Moss is more of an RB3. Number 16 is Jordan Mason. Mason has had 3 straight games under 10 fantasy points. This week, Mason gets to face the Dallas Cowboys run defense, who are last in EPA per rush, and they're actually twice as bad as the second worst team, the New Orleans Saints. The Cowboys defense also ranks 30th in rushing success rate. Coming off of an injury in week 5, Jordan Mason rebounded right back to his original workload with a 74% snap or rush share. Now Ayuk is out, Jennings is probably out, Debo and Kittle are questionable, and the 49ers are favored by 4.5 points. We should expect the Niners to lean on Mason very heavily this week against the Cowboys' run defense. I expect Mason to absolutely smash regardless of recent performance. We have him at RB4 this week. Number 17, the Packers wide receivers. In expected points per game among Packers wide receivers, Romeo Dobbs ranks 1st, Wicks 2nd, Reed 3rd, and Watson 4th. However, Dobbs, Wicks, and Reed are all between 12 to 13 expected points per game. Jordan Love is spreading the targets around, which is very effective for winning games, but not necessarily for my job. I don't love it. Personally, I will continue to bet on Jaden Reed. He had good college metrics, good rookie metrics, and great metrics this year. But it will likely be a different guy every week, and Jaden Reed is probably going to be volatile. Number 18 is J.K. Dobbins. In the first 2 games this season, Dobbins had a 40% rush share, 9% target share, and scored 20-plus fantasy points in both games, despite the limited usage. Since then, Dobbins has improved in usage significantly to a 68% rush share and 11% target share. However, the points per game has not followed. It's at 11.3 points per game over that span. I think this is an example of the trade-off between volume and efficiency. We saw this last year with Tony Pollard. Low volume, high efficiency running backs will often see worse efficiency as their workload increases. This week, J.K. Dobbins gets to face the Saints, who rank 31st in both EPA per rush and rushing success rate. This should be the bounce back game for Dobbins, and hopefully he can maintain a decent efficiency over the rest of the season, because the volume is surely there to be an RB1. Number 19 is Devon Achane. In his rookie season, Achane averaged 12.1 expected points per game. In 2024, this number is up to 16.1. However, his actual points per game has fallen nearly 5 points, from 17 down to the low 13s. One aspect of this is touchdowns. Last year, Achane scored 11 touchdowns on 130 total touches, for a rate of 8.5%. This year, he scored 2 touchdowns on 94 touches, or 2.1%. Achane's efficiency has also regressed dramatically this season. After showing historic efficiency as a rookie, he's now around league average in terms of creating explosive plays. I think his rookie season was a better example of who Achane actually is, and we should expect that efficiency and touchdown rate to bounce back in a big way with Tua returning. I see him as a top 5 running back rest of season. And lastly, George Pickens. Among 92 wide receivers to run 100 or more routes this season, only 3 of them have a target rate above 29% and an air yard share above 40%. These players are Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, and George Pickens. Pickens is currently the wide receiver 8 in expected points per game, but the wide receiver 34 in actual points per game. This is a result of drastic underperformance in the touchdown department. Pickens is 3rd among wide receivers in expected touchdowns at 4.6, but has just 1 touchdown on the season. In the 1-game sample size with Russ at quarterback, Pickens earned a 36% target share and a 70% air yard share. With Russ at quarterback for the foreseeable future and a bit of touchdown regression, I think we could be in store for a massive George Pickens breakout. Thanks for joining me this week on Stat Masters, and I'll see you again next week for 20 stats in under 20 minutes.